Hi, everybody. Welcome to our session this morning. So we're just going to get started now. We were just waiting for a few more people to join us. So if you don't already know me, my name's Steph, and I'm the CEO of GoodCRM, who have organised this morning's session. If you're not already familiar with GoodCRM, we are obviously a CRM company, and we are predominantly a provider for arts and cultural organisations, and we were built specifically for arts and cultural organisations. As you might already know, over 40% of our current customers are MPOs or investment principal support organisations or creative people and places organisations. So we know a lot about Arts Council reporting and Arts Council funding and all of the requirements that you need to do throughout the year here. And we do whatever we can really to support our customers in order to be able to do that easily and hopefully stress-free. So I'll just explain just a few housekeeping things about this morning. So first of all, we are recording this session, so you will be able to access it afterwards, but also you can share it with colleagues. The other thing to note is that we are having a chat open, and please do put your questions that come into your head throughout the session into the chat. They might not be asked or answered straight away, but what I'm going to do is try and collate some of them so that we can ask them at the end, or we have a few breaks throughout the session where they might be relevant to ask at that time. So please feel free to use the chat, and that would be great. We're going to start this morning. I'm just going to hand over to Tom first for about 10 minutes, just to tell you a little bit more about GoodCRM. And then we'll be handing over to Kate, who's going to then lead the main session. After that, we then have left plenty of time for a real, really open Q&A session. So hopefully we'll have a really good discussion about all sorts of things in that. But firstly, I will hand over to Tom, and he's just going to spend a couple of minutes talking to you about GoodCRM and everything that we do here.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Steph. I'm going to get started. Let's get that slideshow back up for you. And as Steph says, I'm just going to actually do a little bit of an introduction to GoodCRM for those of you that are unfamiliar. Okay, so yes, I'm Tom. I'm the founder of GoodCRM. And so yeah, for those of you that are less familiar, here's a bit of a quick introduction. There might be some useful nuggets for those of you who are already our customers as well. So as Steph said, it was really interesting to learn that over 40% of our customers are Arts Council funded organisations. So many are national portfolio organisations. We do have creative people and places and investment principal support organisations too, as Steph said. So a big hello, by the way, to those customers who have joined us today. I know we have people who are not yet customers as well. I say yet in a very optimistic, hopeful way. Okay, so this is a really good starting point, I think, for an introduction to GoodCRM. Why is GoodCRM such a tight fit for these types of organizations? So for starters, we are the only organization-wide CRM designed primarily for arts, heritage, and culture. We do work with the wider third sector as well, but our roots are really within this space. And I think that's one of the primary reasons that a lot of ACE-funded organizations do choose to work with GoodCRM. I mentioned that term organization-wide CRM, and I think that's a really important point too. I know Kate is going to talk about all of the sources of data that your organization holds. And for us, it's important that our product gives you a full view of your organization's data and how it all links together. So our CRM is designed to function at its best when it's used by the entire organization, because the different strands of your organization are all interconnected, and one of your participants might also be one of your supporters or one of your collaborators. And it's really important, I think, to get that organization-wide view of your contacts and your data to inform how to nurture your relationships and how to understand and measure and demonstrate your impact as well. And that connectivity, the way your data links together, that's a key principle in GoodCRM. We can use what we call connection fields in the CRM to connect things together, and you can create those connections and decide what relationships are important in your data. So, for example, we can connect funders and partners to a project. We might have events and participants and a session leader connected together as well. And it's this flexibility around how your data connects together that really powers segmentation and reporting in your CRM. So with this example on the screen, we can ask our CRM for things like a demographic breakdown of all of the participants who've been involved in projects funded by the Arts Council, for example. Because we've got all that connectivity, we can use the tools within the CRM to ask those big questions. And for those of you that have seen any of the videos we have online or any of the demos, you might be familiar with this slide, but I think it's a really important point about that connectivity. Okay, finally, when it comes to finances, we know it's really tough out there. And we charge based on two factors. We charge based on the number of staff who need access to your CRM, and also based on the features that you choose to use as well. Other providers have a third factor, which is the amount of data you store, your constituent numbers, the number of custom fields or forms that you choose to use. And that's a lovely model for those providers. I admire them being in that position, but we think it's kind of counterintuitive to effectively discourage use of the CRM. So that's something that we do a bit differently, and we hope that it makes for fairer and more transparent pricing. Okay, so to answer that question, why is GoodCRM such a good fit for ACE-funded organisations? We are built specifically for arts, culture and heritage. We're an organisation-wide CRM, which helps you leverage all of your data. We don't limit ourselves to just tickets or just fundraising or something like that. Our connected data principles allow for powerful segmentation and reporting, and our pricing is really fair and transparent. And importantly, your costs don't grow as the data you store does. Okay, so that's your little message from the sponsor today. Thanks ever so much for sitting through that. And if you do want to learn more about GoodCRM, we're going to put some links in the chat later. But these are the links you need to book a discovery call with us, to view our explainer video, which gives you a bit of a fuller overview of the system. And for more webinars like today's, you can check out our YouTube channel to see the ones we've done in the past. And also do sign up for our newsletter, follow us on social media, and we'll tell you about any upcoming webinars as well. Okay, so I'm going to hand back over to Steph.
Thank you. So yeah, let me introduce you to Kate if you're not already familiar. So Kate Fitzgerald runs Kate Fitzgerald Consulting, and Kate is an expert, I would say, in all things to do with data, particularly in the way that arts and cultural organisations collect, store, and use their data. And Kate also knows a lot about GDPR rules and is always on top of any changing guidance and legislation from places like the Information Commissioner's Office and any other guidelines and regulations that are updated. We first worked with Kate actually to help us with our data. Obviously, as a technology company, we are responsible for a lot of information and data. And as you know, there's sort of a breach every other week from a large organization. I'm sure there was a ticketing one the other week. We really try and make sure that that never happens for us. And we ask Kate to have a look at all of our privacy policies and just mainly do a sweep for us. And we were really, really impressed with everything she did for us. And we know she does some really, really great work with arts and cultural organisations as well. One of the things I noticed that Kate was particularly on top of was all of the changes and I suppose evolution of Arts Council's latest way that they collect information and ask MPOs and other regularly funded organisations to report back to them, particularly with the Illuminate reporting programme. There's been a few updates and changes to keep on top of, and I just thought it would be really useful if we could ask Kate to actually tell us a little bit more about that. And I know that she's also got really hands-on experience with working with Illuminate and has discovered some hacks and tips and tricks and maybe common pitfalls as well. Not that there's anything planted specifically to try and catch people out, but there are things that have come up quite regularly, I think, for you, Kate. So I'll hand over to you and maybe you can tell people a little bit more about your work first.
I'm just
Thank
going to
you.
say before Kate gets started that due to technical limitations today, we're going to be doing a two-handed thing where I'm sharing Kate's slides and she's talking through them. So apologies in advance if it doesn't go as smoothly as it otherwise would. But yes, I'll be doing my best to support you, Kate, and I'm sure it'll all work out. Right, over to you.
Thank you. So Tom, if you want to share the screen, thank you very much for inviting me to speak today, GoodCRM team. And it's quite overwhelming how many people have actually joined the call and want to learn more about data. I'm going to be chatting through a presentation for about an hour. And the presentation is mainly going to be about how you can make data work for you. And whilst the session has been pitched at MPO funded organisations and CPPs and IPSOs, or people who are wanting to look for Arts Council funding, a lot of the content is also applicable to any organisation because it's just about good data practice. So if you're not Arts Council funded, this is still relevant to you. So thank you, Tom. I'm going to start with a quick introduction. So as Steph says, I'm Kate Fitzgerald. I have worked in the arts and cultural sector for almost 25 years. And a large part of that was spent in a venue. So I used to work at the Lowry in Salford Quays, which is a theatre and art gallery. I worked there for 18 years and I was their head of visitor insights. So I was responsible for all their internal reporting, all their funder reporting. Because we were a receiving house, I was also responsible for helping all the MPOs who visited us with their reporting for when they toured to us. And so I'm very familiar with Arts Council reporting requirements and data collections that you need to do. I worked at the Lowry until COVID happened. And then I set up my own company, and I now work with arts, cultural and heritage organisations to improve data confidence, and I specialise in data protection compliance, UK GDPR, because I love it and you don't have to, evaluation insights and audience research, and I've included a link to my website on the bottom. Today we're going to look at exploring various data sources across organisations. We're also going to look at the challenges of not having a data strategy in place and what the benefits of the strategic approach might be for data collection. I'm going to do a very quick whistle-stop tour of evaluation frameworks. And in this context, I'm talking about applying it to an organisation, but they can be applied to projects or particular initiatives. So again, that's relevant for most people here. And then we're going to finish up the session with looking at Arts Council England's Illuminate platform with a particular focus on the survey. So let's talk about organisational data. So organisations often have more data at their disposal than they realise, and it comes from a wide range of sources. It's a very valuable asset. It can offer insights into your impacts, it can help you make informed decisions, and it can enable you to refine your approach. And we're going to look at all the fantastic data you have and where you might be able to find it now. So first of all, we're going to look at activity data. So this is all the things that you do as an organisation. So it's anything that you do as an output. If you're a theatre, it might be the number of performances and productions that you have. If you're a museum or a gallery, it might be exhibitions. If you're a charity, it might be the amount of fundraising activities that you do. So it's all your activity data. We've also got audience data, and there's tons of that if you're collecting it and storing it properly. So this is how you're engaging with your audiences. And when I say audiences, because I'm very aware that there's lots of different organizations on this call, I mean audiences in the broadest sense of the term. So it's whoever you're engaging with. So, they could be ticket buyers, they could be visitors who are coming in through general admission. This sort of data might include things like postcode data, which helps you map your audiences and find out areas in which you're engaging and areas in which you're not engaging. It might be transactional data, so how often they're engaging with you, if they are spending money with you or donating to you, how much that is. You've got loads of information about your audiences. It might be things they're interested in or the actual amount of people you're able to contact to promote your work. Next up, we've got workforce. So these are all your paid and permanent staff, the volunteers that you work with, the artists and freelancers that you work with. Basically, anyone you work with, there will be lots of data about them within your organization. We've also got operational data. So this is anything to do with the actual running of your organization. So an example of that might be something like your sustainability and environmental impact. And then finally, we've got financial data. So this is your income and expenditure for the organization and how that splits out across the organization, how that money is raised and used. So we've got all this amazing amounts of data, and it's probably saved in lots and lots of different places. And now we're going to look at where those places might be. So first of all, we've got systems. So CRM systems like GoodCRM. Hopefully you've got your data in a GoodCRM or another CRM system. They're not, as you say, restricted to just customers. It can include stakeholders and staff. It depends how you use your CRM system, but there'll be lots and lots of information within your CRM system, and you should be able to pull lots of analysis and reports from them. It might also be in your box office and ticketing systems if you have those. You've also got your finance system, your HR system, basically any system where data is stored, that you will be able to get some information from them. Next up, we've got information that you get direct from people. So these are surveys, forms, case studies, and that might be with your audiences. It might be with your staff. It might be with your stakeholders or your artists that you're working with. This is sort of direct feedback that you're getting that gives you a bit more information about the people that you're working with. And it can also give you some really nice qualitative feedback. We've got digital data. So that's all the analytics in your website platform and any of your social media platforms that you're using. So that's like your reach, your engagement, and your impressions. You also might have an email marketing platform, which will have lots and lots of stats about how people are engaging with the information that you're sending out and what things like return on investment might be. And then the last two are good old-fashioned spreadsheets and reports. There's nothing wrong with a good old-fashioned report or spreadsheet. Spreadsheets, there will be lots of them in your organization. That some of them will just contain numbers and figures, and it might not have any context to it. Some spreadsheets might contain actual personal data. If they do, please make sure that they're properly protected, so they're restricted access and password protected, or better yet, put it into a CRM system like GoodCRM, so your data's secure. And again, with reports, you might have commissioned previous research reports that gives you information that you've already looked at before, and there might be internal reports that have been written that could help with your data gathering. So there's absolutely tons of data for organizations, no matter how big or small. And the reason why it's important to know about all the different types of data and where it is because you will be asked to report on it by someone. So that might be someone internally. It might be, your line manager wants to know a particular figure, or your chief exec wants to know a particular figure. You might have KPIs to report. But you also might have to report this information to funders. And Arts Council England are definitely interested in all the types of data on the previous slide. All of those things come up both in the annual survey for MPOs as well as in Illuminate. So it's really important that you know about all these types of data and where to get them from. So we're moving on to what happens when you don't have a plan. So this is where, what I mean by this is when there isn't an overarching strategy towards data collection. So it means data collection is not strategic. So that means that your data collection is happening, but it's not really done in any joined up way, and it might not necessarily all feed into the same big picture. It just might be lots of different data collections taking place across the organization. And this means that you can miss opportunities to collect data because you don't know that there's data that you need to collect. And then that means that if you're not collecting that data, you're not deepening your deepening your understanding of your audiences or whoever it is that you're evaluating. Tom, can you just move on 2 more clicks? Thanks. And it also might mean that you have inconsistent data collections across teams or projects. So you might all know that you need to collect a particular type of data, but if you haven't agreed how you're going to do it, then people might be doing it in slightly different ways. And if data's not really comparable, then that makes it really difficult to measure success or progress over time because you're not collecting data in a consistent, robust manner. And then finally, you might also have the inability to quickly respond to requests for data. So that might be someone internally just needing to know a number. They might be putting in another funding application and they need to know what's happening internally with a particular thing and that will support their funding application. Or it might be that you do actually need to hit a funder deadline. So if you're not collecting all that information, there's no strategy, then it can make it very difficult to respond to those sorts of requests. So Tom, if you want to move on to the next slide. So these are the reasons why I think having a data strategy is essential. So the benefits to having an organization-wide strategy to data collection is it genuinely does help you evidence your organizational impact because you know what you have to collect and what you need to do and who you need to report it to. It helps to create a clear process for data collection and use. So it gets everyone on the same page. So everyone internally understands why you're collecting, what you're collecting, and what it's being used for. Going back to the previous slide, it helps ensure consistency in reporting so that you're making sure that if you are collecting the same thing across different points of the organization, that you're all doing it in the same way. And that means that when you're reporting to your stakeholders, that data is going to be accurate and robust. It also helps increase efficiencies and reduce errors or missed data. We'll come on to that later. And finally, it helps you make informed data-driven decisions, which is really important. You want to ensure that whatever you're spending your time or your budget on is backed up by clear data. And so you know that you can make changes and make a reasonable impact. So moving on to the next slide. We're going to talk about evaluation frameworks, and this is going to be a whistle-stop tour of them because they do take a long time to build, but I'm going to give you the building blocks for them. So first of all, what is an evaluation framework? Tom? Thank you. It's nothing special. It's usually a spreadsheet, and I love spreadsheets, and it's basically a roadmap. That's all it is. It is not a magical spreadsheet that collects all your data and then gives you the answers. It's telling you how to get that information. So an evaluation framework is a structured approach to gathering, analysing, and interpreting data. And it helps you track progress, understand what is working and what isn't working, and it helps you make improvements based on clear goals and evidence. But I must stress, it isn't a magical spreadsheet that just automatically gathers all that data for you. That is a big part of what you will have to do next. So we're going to look at the steps for creating an evaluation framework. But first of all, before you start creating one, you've got to plan it properly because it is a big investment, both in terms of time, people's resources, to install one. So I'm going to talk through them. There's 10 steps. And we're going to talk about most of them in depth on future slides. So if we whiz through these, that's why. So the first thing to do is you've got to identify your stakeholders. This is crucial because they're the people who have a vested interest in the outcomes of your evaluation. It might include your staff, it might include your funders or board members, it could potentially include your audiences, and engaging them early in the process helps ensure that their needs and perspectives are reflected in the framework, and it helps to increase buy-in because they feel like they're being part of the process and it's not just something that's happening to them. It can also help align your evaluation with the organisation's broader goals, and that input can help to which areas to focus on, ensuring the framework captures the most relevant and valuable data for decision making. So when you're planning your framework, you need to treat it like a project plan. You need to have what these key steps are and then what the time frame is, because you're going to be asking people for help. So you need to make it clear to them what you're going to be doing. So you need to involve your key staff and make sure that you're doing this when it's not a super duper busy time for them. Because if it is, they're probably not going to want to help you at that time. So it's being very aware of those internal resources and any date restrictions. So involve your key staff. The next step is to clarify your organizational goals and priorities. So ideally, you guys should have a mission statement somewhere that explains what the purpose of your organization is. You might have some organizational core values that are defined. And you might have a business plan that contains your key priorities for the next 3 to 5 years. So you need to know what those are if you're looking at an organizational framework, because they're the big strategic goals that you're going to be working to. And it's really important that everyone's on the same page. And again, this goes back to involving key staff and identifying your stakeholders. Next step is to review your current data practices, which we are going to talk about on the next slide. So I'm just going to skate over that one for now. And then once you've done all that, then you can actually start designing your evaluation frameworks. That's when you can actually start putting information into a spreadsheet. And again, we're going to go through the steps of that on a future slide. And after you've designed your framework, what you're then going to have to do is you're going to have to assign clear roles and responsibilities for people who are going to help you collect all this data. And you really do need to provide things like training and additional resources for those people to give them the confidence to do that and to make sure that they are doing it properly. It also, again, that helps increase buy-in because you're supporting people and empowering them to do what you're asking them to do, not just expecting them to do something. It's really important to do this in a collaborative manner. Next step is to launch the framework. So once you've got it and it's all signed off internally by all those key staff who have been involved in it, tell people about it. So I know when I was at the Lowry, when we first launched our evaluation framework, there was a quarterly staff meeting that happened every time there was a new season, and people from across departments would come and give updates on what was happening in the future. And I went and spoken about evaluation framework, so everyone in the company knew why we were doing it. Do go and share it to your board. Do make sure that people know that the work that they've contributed to has had an impact, and you are now going to be doing something in a different way. And then you need to make evaluation part of the routine process. I'm a huge advocate for little and often. Because I did work in a very busy venue that had about 900 events a year. So it's no good doing it all on one day at the end of the year. Little and often is best. And it also means if you're doing little and often, if you get asked a question outside of a reporting time, you've got the right answer for that period of time, that you've got an accurate response. So do try and make evaluation part of the routine process. And then finally, remember that an evaluation framework is a live document. You need to regularly review and update it. If things aren't working, then you need to tweak it so that you have a new collection method that does work. If something happens where, for example, you don't need to collect that data anymore, then take it out of your framework because you don't need it anymore. But that is how you plan your evaluation framework. And now we're going to look at how to actually build one. So we talked about the stakeholders. So this is auditing your data. This is essentially steps 2 to 5 on the previous slide. So the first is, what data do you actually need to collect? So what does your business plan say? What do you say in your funder agreements? What do your funders say that they require in terms of reporting? Have you made any promises within agreements that you need to evidence? So what data do you actually need to collect to achieve your objective? Then you need to look at what data you're already collecting and how. So people will be collecting data across organizations. How is it being collected? What data are they collecting? How are they using it? What strategies does it feed into? You need to understand the context of the data that's already being collected. You then need to find out, is there any duplication of work? This happens to me all the time when someone would ask me for a figure, and then another department would be like, oh, we were already collecting that. And if you're not talking to each other and you don't have this strategy in place, you will just find that people are collecting the same information, which is a waste of people's time. You only need one person to collect it. And again, if there is duplication of work, then it can result in people collecting data slightly differently, and then you're not having the true answer. So this will help you identify if there is any duplication of work, and this will then later go into assigning those roles and responsibilities when you're implementing your collection. Are you undertaking any unnecessary data collections? Is there stuff that you collect just because you used to, and you've not changed anything, but actually you don't need that information because it doesn't feed into any kind of strategy, or it's not required for funder reporting? If you don't need to collect data, then don't. If it's just nice to know, I honestly don't think that's a good enough reason to collect personal data in particular. So really do think about whether or not you're undertaking any unnecessary data collections. Is there any data that you should be collecting, but you're not? So again, this goes back to the data, what data you need to collect. After you've looked at everything that's already been collected, have you got big gaps in data where you can't actually evidence what you've said that you'll collect? So you need to identify what those gaps are. And then finally, you need to look at available resources. So, how busy is everybody? Because everyone is very time poor in organizations. I'm fully aware of that. Do you have money already available to do stuff? Like, if you need an external survey platform, have you got the budget to do that? Or is one already in place? You need to assess what tools and resources you have available, and then you need to determine if there's any additional ones you might need in order to deliver the framework. And you might have to put together a business case in order to get the budget for that. And so you need to be able to articulate why this evaluation framework is important. So that's steps 1 to 5. This is a fun little cartoon that I found on LinkedIn, and it's Halloween related, so I thought I'd put it in. But the reason I put this in before we start talking about frameworks is because when I'm talking to clients, quite often there's confusion around an output versus an outcome. And I saw this and it really did make me laugh. So just in case anyone can't see because it is quite small, there's a teacher ghost teaching some pupil ghosts. And on a blackboard, it says the number of times you said boo is the output. And the teacher ghost says, remember team, the number of times you say boo is just an output. Our desired outcome is striking fear into the hearts of the living. I thought that summed it up really, really well. And I've got that pinned on my LinkedIn page now because I think it's genius. But that's the difference between outputs and outcomes. And I just wanted to do that before we start talking about delivering the actual evaluation framework. So moving on, building your framework. The things that appear in boxes are what I would recommend you put as a column header when you're building a framework in a spreadsheet. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you very briefly about what each of these ones are. And then at the end, I'm going to give you like a real example of one that I'm working through at the moment, if that helps. So the first thing is your strategic goal, or your key priority, or your core values. What is the big thing that you're measuring against? And you shouldn't have too many of these. I'd like to say you have probably about 5 tops because they're the really big stuff. So ideally, as I said before, they should be tied to your organization's mission, core values, or key priorities. That will make this framework the most effective, in my opinion, because you're proving how you meet your organizational mission and your overall purpose. So you've got your strategic goal. You've then got your objective. So what is it you're planning to do? What is it you're trying to achieve? And then you've got your desired outcomes. So again, we've had the boo example and the striking fear into hearts of the living. So what is your desired outcome? What change is it that you want to see or create from the work that you do? You then need to look at outputs to be developed. And what I mean by this is what do you need to do in order to achieve your objective? So that might be you need to create a artistic program, or you need to put on some workshops, or you need to build a visitor survey or audience survey or staff survey. It's all the things you're going to have to do in order to be able to deliver your desired objective and desired outcomes. You then need to decide, in terms of your measurement, is it going to be a quantitative measure or a qualitative measure? So a quantitative measure is something that you can assign a number or a value to. And a qualitative measure is the softer stuff that really helps with the narrative of explaining what those figures mean. So you need to decide that. And then once you've got that, you can look at your output indicators. So your outputs, you might need to develop a series of workshops. Your outputs are the number of workshops that you've developed and how many places are available on that workshop and how many people took up those places on that workshop. And then you might have satisfaction scores around those workshops, and you also might have general qualitative feedback around those workshops. So that's your output indicator. Your outcome indicator is a measurable and observable variable or metric that reflects the desired result or the impact of your initiative. So it typically represents a specific change or achievement that can be attributed to the work that you've done. And I'll go on to that in the example in a minute. You've got your collection method. So how are you actually going to get this data? Is it literally you run a report from your CRM system? Brilliant, just one click. Do you have to do an audience or visitor survey? Then you need to build that and figure out how you're going to get it to those people and how you're going to process those results. Do you need to do some financial reporting, in which case you need to involve your accounts team? Like, how are you going to collect all that information? You need to map all that out. And then you need to ideally set targets, because if you don't set a target, you don't know what you're measuring yourself against. You're just collecting numbers. So please do set targets. And again, please do be mindful when you're doing your funding applications that if you stick targets in there, make them consistent across all your applications, and don't be surprised when someone presents a framework back to you saying, this is your target, and you say, where did that number come from? It's because you've promised it in an application somewhere, and you would get that through that data audit that we talked about earlier. And then finally, to make your life a bit easier, you should map again why you're collecting this data. So is it because you need it for internal reporting, for an internal KPI? Or is it because you need to meet a funding requirement? So you need to do it because you've got Arts Council Illuminate, or you've got to do the Arts Council annual survey, or there's another funder that isn't Arts Council that requires reporting at certain times. If you clearly map out how you're collecting that data and what it's feeding into, it shows that you're collecting it for a proper reason. So they're the 10 headings of your framework. And I'm going to talk through a very quick example of what I'm working through at the moment. So sorry, Tom, if you could just go back to the last slide where it's all of the things. So I'm working on a framework at the moment, and the strategic goal, for example, is artist and talent development. So that's the big goal that they want to achieve. So in terms of the objective for that goal, they want to generate talent platforms for diverse artists. So you've got your goal and you've got your objective, and their desired outcome is that by establishing accessible and inclusive platforms and programs that engage and support artists from a variety of backgrounds, it will help promote cultural diversity in the arts. So that's their desired outcome from that objective. And in terms of outputs to be developed, in order to do those things, they've got to design the programs themselves. So they've got to create those programs. Once they've created those programs, they've got to determine if there's any specific things within those programs, like workshops or networking events or CPD stuff. So those have all got to be developed. That's an output. They're going to want to talk to those artists who have been involved in those programs and platforms. So there'll probably be some artist research that is needed, and that might require a survey, or it might require artist interviews. But these are the things that you're going to have to develop in order to deliver your objective. So they're your outputs. The output indicators in this case is the number of programs developed, the number of associated events delivered, the number of applications for those programs, the number of successful applicants for those programs. It might be demographic data of the artists who take part. There's lots and lots of different outputs that you can have to support your objective. And then the outcome indicator is that they will establish programs that attract diverse artists, increase representation, and that they receive positive feedback from artists on how programs have influenced their artistic development. So they're the outcome indicators. So that's a real example of one that I'm working through at the moment. So I hope that's put all that into context. So Tom, we can move on to the next slide. So embedding your evaluation framework. This is the biggest battle, I think, because it's all very well one person designing a beautiful spreadsheet, but you need everyone to buy into it and agree to do it. So for an evaluation framework to work effectively, you really, really do need that buy-in, because you're going to be asking people to help you deliver it. You might be asking them to change something that they're already doing, and people don't really like change. So you've got to talk them through that and hold their hand. And you've got to make it easy for them. And then you've got to tell, they might be reporting results to you. So you might be asking them to doing something additional to what they're already doing now. So you need to make this a really nice process, and you need to make people be able to see the benefits. So in order to make it easy for them, create accompanying resources. So do have a data strategy that people can refer to. If you've introduced the evaluation framework spreadsheet to people, have a guide so they can actually read it, because they can look really overwhelming. And they're very dry. But, have that sort of guide. Have FAQs, like, why are you doing it? Why is it important? How is that data going to be used? Especially if you're asking people to do collections with your audiences, because audiences don't say, well, why are you asking me these questions? You want them to be able to answer that question really quickly rather than say, oh, I don't know. So, create all these things. If you're going to be asking members of your organization to do their own surveys, create a question bank that they literally copy and paste their questions and answers from. They can add additional ones in if they want to that's specific to them, but the ones that you need to collect, make sure that you give it to them in the way that it's consistent so they can all use it in a really easy manner. You need to provide necessary training. We talked about that earlier. You need to give people confidence. Again, going back to sort of survey collections, if you're expecting a member of staff to walk up to someone with an iPad and ask them to complete the Illuminate survey, then they need to know why they're doing it, where that data's going, how Arts Council are going to be using it. You need to tell them how to sample properly so they're not just going after the same person all the time and that you are getting a representative sample of your audiences. You need to provide that training. If you are getting a new survey platform and you're expecting people to go in and build it, build surveys within it, make sure they know how. Don't just expect them to follow the how-to guides in the platform. If you know how to do it, hold training sessions where you show them how to build a survey or how to export their results. You need to make it really, really easy. You need to share the evaluation framework. So I've talked about this, so that it's not just something where you've gone and at the start ask people for a load of information and then tell them what to do. You need to share it widely and tell them why it's important and remind people that it's an ongoing process. Like, now it's in place, is something that they should be, doing in all their evaluations. So it's reminding people that if they are doing a new project, that, build evaluation in at the start and look at the evaluation framework to see exactly what it is that they need to be capturing. You need to keep on top of data collection. So again, I really do advocate for little and often. So I used to do it as a monthly task. It never really took me more than 2 hours, and I was working for a very, very large organisation with lots and lots of reporting, both internally and for other MPOs. If you are, in that position where you are helping other MPOs with their evaluation, then I used to just build it into my diary that I had to do it at certain times so that that person wasn't stressed out about meeting a deadline and that everyone was getting the information when they needed it. And I wasn't pulling all the data in one go in a frantic hurry, trying to meet those deadlines. So, do keep on top of data collection. Regularly share your learnings. So if something's worked really well, tell people about it, because they really will want to know. It will really help boost morale. If something hasn't worked, own those failures. Like, it's important to learn from mistakes, and it's important to share those with people so that you can learn. And share it with as many people as possible. If it's within, it might be in staff meetings, it might be just introducing it to your board. But do share the evaluation framework and share the learnings from it so that people can see that what the time and money they've invested in it does give you a proper return. And then finally, remember it's a live document, so regularly review and refine it. If you're finding that bits of it aren't working, go back to the drawing board and figure out why. Change it slightly. So those are mainly how you do the evaluation framework. It was a very quick whistle-stop tour. And we have got time for questions on the next slide. If Steph has any now that you want me to tackle before we get on to the next section.
I haven't had any through the chat, so feel free to pop a question in the chat now if you have one for Kate. Or I'm reluctant to ask people to unmute just because there's so many people in this call, 60 something people. But yeah, if you you can pop a notification in the chat if you have a question, but I don't have any at the moment.
Okay, fine. Tom, shall we move back on to the next slide then? Right, so next slide. So this is the one that is specific to, there it is. This is the one that is specific to people who are Arts Council funded. Or if you're thinking about becoming Arts Council funded and you want to kind of know what the reporting requirements might be. There is lots of reporting for the Arts Council, but I'm only going to focus on the Illuminate collection today. And the focus will mainly be on audience surveys, because that's how I mainly engage with the platform, because obviously I'm not a venue, so I don't need to be uploading activity and event data and audience data all the time, but I have uploaded survey data. So first of all, what is Illuminate?
Okay, sorry, I have just had a question through.
Oh, okay.
Just before you were fully into it. So someone's asked, what is the difference between strategic goals and objectives? So those were the first things that you had in your evaluation framework that you were setting out.
So your strategic goal is literally like the really big thing an organisation is working for. So that might be that you engage with your local communities, or that you do artist or talent development, or that you are a resilient and sustainable organisation. They're really, really big, broad goals that are very difficult to measure without being broken down further. Your objective is breaking that down further. So how are you going to achieve that? So if you're in the example I gave, if the big strategic goal is we want to be an organisation that nurtures and develops talent of artists or emerging artists, that's a really, really big goal. Then the objective is you're going to build a series of programs that will help do that. So it's the big goal versus the smaller goals, and you just work your way through the framework doing that. So your big goal might actually have like 10 objectives against it, or 3 or 4, it depends what it is. But the big goal delivers across.
Yeah, so it's actually more like you said, an organizational mission or vision type thing is the strategic goal, and you might just have one. Yeah, great, thank you. Someone else has asked, how would you organize the evaluation framework between projects, or is it best to create one that covers all activities?
So what I think you can do is if you do take an organizational approach, you have the one that basically informs the whole organization. That's what the organization is reporting on. Obviously, if you're doing a specific project, there might be other things that you're really interested in that's specific to that project, but it doesn't feed into the overall picture or the overall narrative that your organization is going to do at the end of the year. So you can just add them in. So you would look at your organizational framework. You would take the things that you know you need to collect based upon the areas that you're looking at. So you'd work them in as your starting point, and then you would add anything in that you are really interested in specific to that project. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, so you might create an organizational wide one, and then as you're maybe shaping up your projects, you might then be adding new things in there, and then it will work across the piece as well.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Should we do Illuminate? Okay, let's do Illuminate. So what is Illuminate? It's Art Council England's audience data platform that was developed with PricewaterhouseCoopers, and it was launched last year. There were some teething problems, but some of them have been fixed already, which is brilliant, and some of them are ongoing. And Arts Council are very open with their dialogue and are very open to feedback, as are PricewaterhouseCoopers. But Illuminate, if you're an MPO, an IPSO, or a CPP, you have to use Illuminate to report on your activities and your audiences. And you have to do that on a quarterly basis within the Illuminate platform. As well as your activity and audiences, there is also an audience survey. Now, this one is mandatory for CPPs at the moment, but it isn't mandatory at the moment for MPOs and IPSOs, although I personally would encourage you to still collect that information, because Arts Council England do use data to advocate for arts and culture to government, and I think it's really important there's no gaps in data knowledge, no matter, if there's still tweaks to be ironed out, I would still rather you collect that data. And then CPPs also have to use the Impact and Insights Toolkit, which is separate, and I'm not talking about that today, but that's another Arts Council collection. So that is what Illuminate is. It's a platform that you use to report on your activity and audiences. So moving on to the next slide, this is some key information that you need to know about the platform. So you have to report quarterly. So if we're in the third quarter, at the end of the third quarter, you report on at the start of the third quarter, you report on the previous quarter. The deadlines are all in the platform. Everything is activity and event level. So, if you have lots and lots of activities, then there'll be lots and lots of activities within Illuminate. If there's not so many, there'll be less. And the reason I say this is that only some CRMs and ticketing providers are currently integrated. So at the moment, the only people who are currently integrated are Spectrix and Ticketsolve. So this means that if you use them, then if your activity is already in there, it will automatically upload to Illuminate, which is great. And Ticketsolve, according to the FAQs for Arts Council, is soon to be integrated. Oh, it's integrated now. Someone's just put in the chat. That's great news. So there's 3 that are integrated. And that is really good if you are on those systems, because it means all your data uploads automatically. If you're not on those systems, then there is a general API available, which allows ticket providers to connect to Illuminate and to directly share data. But that does mean, because it's a general API, that the time and development costs fall to that supplier. So that isn't ideal, because you're relying on them then developing that feature for you to make your life easier. And then there's an audience survey we've talked about, and that can be done via the Illuminate platform, or you can use another tool, and we're going to look at both of those things in a moment. So that is what Illuminate is. And we'll move on to the next slide. So before I start talking about the survey in depth, organisations who don't have to do the survey, so they're totally exempt from it, you don't have to do it, are if you're solely touring, you don't have to do it. If you're business to business, so that means if you're like a service provider, so you're not actively engaging with audiences, you're a service provider. If you're focused on artist or talent development, or if you're a publisher. And then finally, if your audiences or participants are all under the age of 16, or they're all vulnerable adults. If one of those organisations, you don't have to do the survey. You do still have to report on your activity, but you don't have to do the survey. Okay? So let's talk about the survey. So I'm going to give you a quick overview. So like all your ticketing and the audience information, it's at event level. So that means that you need to send a survey for each event that you want to survey. You can't send one survey link to all your events and hope that it maps back. It has to be at event level. There is a survey platform, there is a survey template available in the platform. So this is brilliant. So Arts Council make sure that when you go into the Illuminate platform, if you want to download a template, you get a pre-populated template with all the mandatory questions included. So you don't have to build it, it's just there. It includes mandatory questions. So there's 19 of those. So these are 19 questions that you have to ask. And they are broken down into 3 sets of groups. So you've got questions around the event itself, and everything being at event and activity level. You've got some questions about the audiences and the audience makeup of the party. And you've also got demographics in there, lots of audience demographics. There's also a bank of optional questions that you can use and include. So that can be found again in the platform. And they cover all kinds of different things. So they cover things like audience travel, ratings and satisfaction, things to do with your local area. There's plenty of things in there that you can add into your survey. And if you want to make it longer and you want to find out some more information other than the mandatory questions. And then there's also suggested sample sizes. These are on the Arts Council website. If you go to the Illuminate FAQs, there's a link that takes you through to their recommended sample sizes. I'm not going to go through them all because they completely differ depending upon the size of your organisation, the size of your audience, and they are suggested at the moment. I don't think there is an actual mandatory sample size at present, but they do give you guidance on what the minimum sample should be. So that is a brief intro to the survey. So we're going to look at using Illuminate platform to do the survey, and I'm going to look at the pros and cons of that. So the pros are it's free. Budgets are, tight for organisations. I'm fully aware of that. This is a free platform and you have to use it anyway. So regardless of whether or not you use it for the survey, you're still going to have to use the platform. So it's free and you have to use it anyway. That is a big pro. There's also the templates available within the platform. They're pre-built, so you can just, if you're not changing them in any way, they're really quick to use and you can just get them sent out. And then the biggest pro is that the data goes directly into the platform, so you don't have to worry about doing an upload later. So they're the pros for using the platform. The cons of using the Illuminate platform are that you might not be able to include all the questions that you want. So you have to include all the mandatory ones, and you've got this bank of optional questions. But if there's a question you want to ask and it's not in the optional questions, you can't add one in. So you just can't collect it. And if you can't also add a data capture question. So if you wanted, for example, to incentivize your survey in order to try and encourage more responses, you can't do that because you can't ask people to submit an email address. If you're an unticketed venue or organization, I work with one of those where they do lots and lots of face-to-face surveys, and they collect people's email addresses there. And it gives, it helps them build their mailing list when they're collecting their surveys. They ask it as an extra question, like, do you want to join our mailing list? And they get a really high response. But you're missing that opportunity because you can't add that data capture question. And there's also limited space for explanatory text. And I think this is really particularly important in the demographic section, because I look at results all the time from surveys, and you get to the comments bits and it's just always, why are you asking these questions? What's this got to do with anything? And that's when they're being polite. There's a lot of more stronger worded ones than that. So having limited space for explanatory text as to why you're collecting that information can be challenging. So they're the pros and cons of using the Illuminate platform. And then you can survey using another tool. So another tool might be GoodCRM. And Tom's going to talk about that at the end. I use SurveyMonkey. But a really big pro of using another tool is you can include additional questions. You can include questions to your heart's content. Like, I don't want you to have a survey that takes someone an hour to fill in, but you can include questions that are relevant to your organization that you might not be able to do through Illuminate. And importantly, it does allow you to include that explanatory text about why you're collecting those things. So when I build a survey, for example, I try to have a bit of explanatory text on each section of the survey. So like if we're asking someone about their visit, why are we asking you about your visit and what we're going to do with that data? And if we're asking you about demographics, why are we asking you that? And now I do firmly say that we're asking these questions because we're required to as part of our Arts Council funding. I've done some suggested wording, which you can get on my website if you want to have it. But that's a really big bonus in my view. You can add that data capture question. So if you're, again, not ticketed, it's a good way of building up your mailing list, or you can incentivize your survey if you need to. And it also gives you flexibility to take part in other research. So there's plenty of other research things going on in the sector. The audience agency still exists. Obviously, there's Indigo Share and all kinds of different bits of research that you might want to take part in. And it gives you that flexibility because those people make sure that they build in the mandatory questions. And it also means that if you're already doing research for your organisation, you've got an established programme of research in place, then it can continue because you can mould it however you want to and just work in those mandatory questions. And then, sorry, my computer's frozen. And then the cons, cost. So, there is a cost if you're going to use an external tool. And again, some of those are based on number of users. So you really do need to factor that in. And then the biggest con, in my view, is the need to upload the data to Illuminate because it can take a long time. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to chat through, Tom, if you move on to the next slide, I'm going to chat through other like my experience of using another platform. So I generally, sorry,
Kate, we've just had a question through just maybe before you start the next section, just clarifying something you've mentioned before, but when would be, do you want me to?
You can do that now if you want, if that's easier.
Yeah. So someone's asked, am I correct in thinking that MPOs are required to obtain at least 10% of audience completing a survey for every activity? Someone's actually helpfully posted some guidance from ACE, but saying about that it's not mandatory for MPOs and IPSOs, but I'm wondering where that 10% came from. Maybe you can shed some light on.
I think that 10% came from when they first announced the sample sizes when they launched Illuminate, because basically on the launch call, they went, this is the new sample size, and everyone panicked. Because when it was, so the people who used to do this kind of collection prior to Illuminate was the audience agency. And their maximum sample size was 380, which for small organizations is still really difficult to hit.
Yeah.
if you work in a really large organization with a massive mailing list and you can just send out one email to people who come in the past year, then you can probably do it in one collection. But again, there's pros and cons of doing that, because you're then skewing responses to just online responses and the people who are already engaged and all that kind of thing. But I think that 10% came from the initial sharing of the sample sizes. I was looking around actually, because I saw recently that there was no mandatory sample size at the moment, and it was up to the organisations to determine what was most relevant for them. But I couldn't find it again after I read it, so I just know the ones that are in the Arts Council Illuminate FAQs.
Yeah, someone's just said there's been some conflicting advice on the Arts Council website.
Okay, all right. Okay, so I want to talk to you about uploading audience survey data successfully into Illuminate. So as someone who's used another platform to deliver the Illuminate collection, I want to share with you the things that I've learned along the way, so you don't have to make the same mistakes that I did. And that's what we're going to talk about now. So first of all, if you're building your survey in another platform, and I cannot stress this enough because this is my first downfall, make sure the mandatory questions and answer sets match exactly. And by this, I mean exactly. So you really need to pay close attention to casing and spacing, which I didn't realize, and I probably should have done, but you don't know until you try. So I'm going to give you a quick example. So in the event information that Arts Council ask you to collect, they have a question that says, when did you last visit? And then whatever the MPO is or the event. And then they have a second question later on, which is, how often do you attend or participate in arts and cultural experiences? Now, on those answer options, on the first one, when did you last visit an MPO? The format of the answers are, for example, 0 space dash space 6 space months. But on the second question, there's no spaces between the number and the dash. Now, I used to proofread as a large part of my job, and I like consistency, as do my clients. So I was asked to make that spacing consistent. It made every single response fail for that reason. So even if it's not consistent on the template, use exactly what's on the template. The same goes for casing. There's something where there's like, I think it's in the socio and economic question, one of the answer options is none of the above, not known, not applicable, and all of it's in title case apart from there's one stray capital on the not known. So I reduced it, and then again all of those responses got rejected. So genuinely copy and paste it, don't even type, because if you do a keystroke error you're going to get a load of errors when you try to upload it. So literally copy and paste their mandatory questions into your platform tool. The second thing I would say is decide if you want their mandatory questions to actually be mandatory in your survey. So what I mean by this is if it is mandatory, then a respondent cannot move on to the next question unless they answer the question. Again, just from experience with the sheer amount of demographics that are asked, most of my clients do not make those questions mandatory. We like the answer set. There is the prefer not to say thing, but they don't force that answer. So you need to decide if that's something that you want to do and how that might affect someone's engagement with your actual survey. You then need to decide if you need to include all the mandatory event questions. So by this, it does need time back to an activity, but you're going to be uploading it to that activity. So if you're only asking about one event, and it was only on, for example, in the evening, there was no other option to attend, do you actually need to ask them what event they came to, because you know what event they came to because you're sending it to the bookers of that event? And do you actually need to ask that question, what time of day did you attend, because you know the answer is going to be 7:30 because that's the time the performance started, for example. I'm not advocating for doing this across the board. It's just on event questions, and it's something that you'll have to add in later. But if there's stuff that you don't have to ask, I wouldn't, because then you can keep your survey a little bit shorter. And then the big thing is you really do need to be prepared to undertake some manual data formatting, which we will chat about in a second. So that's building your survey. Once you've built your survey and you've got all your responses, you're going to need to get your data ready for upload. So the first thing you do is you need to download the survey template from the platform. It will have a weird name. Do not change it. If you change the name of the file, it won't accept the upload. You need to keep the file name exactly as it is. So that's the first thing. So you download that template. You need to download all your responses from your survey. And then you need to get ready to start cutting and pasting. So you need to, by each answer, find the corresponding column on the Arts Council template and then copy those answers into that column. Okay. And once you've done that, you should have all your answers that you've been collecting in another tool into the template. And you would only upload the mandatory questions, not all the other questions that you've asked. So filter is going to become your new best friend. And apologies if this is teaching anyone to suck eggs, but if you don't know, you don't know. So you're going to have to use filtering on these questions. So when you're in your spreadsheet, if towards the right-hand side, there is a little drop-down menu that says sort and filter. So you select the row that you want to be doing that on, and then you apply filter, and then it will allow you to filter those questions by the answers received. Okay. So that'll be your new best friend. Apologies if that is teaching people how to suck eggs, but everyone uses Excel as much as I do. So if you move on to the next slide, so formatting your data, I'm going to look at this in terms of the different question types. So we're going to start off with the event information. So if you chose not to include all the mandatory event questions, then you need to add that detail. So if you know that, I don't know, they came to see, we'll do it on a theatre thing, they came to see the musical Hairspray, but it was only on for one night, then you would add in the event they came to was Hairspray, and they came, I think it's 6 till 10 o'clock is the corresponding answer response. You don't have to include all the others. So you would add all that sort of stuff in. And again, that should be a very quick, you type in the first thing you want to do and then just drag the answer down to all the responses. So it applies to all the responses. So you know that that's done. If you did include those questions, but you didn't make them mandatory, so when you've said, what date did you attend? And there's a blank response, you're going to have to remove that blank response because you can't assume when that person came if it's over multiple dates. You can't make assumptions, so you are just going to have to lose that line of data because even if they've answered all the other questions, it will not upload if that is blank. So you will have to lose some lines of data. We're going to look at the types of audience. So this is the question around who did you come with, and then what are the ages of the people that you came with if you get that follow-up question, if you didn't attend by yourself. The important thing to know is it has to be numerical data. I think on the Arts Council mandatory question template, they suggest you do this as multiple text boxes, which is fine. But if you don't have the facility to force a numerical response, you're going to have to change every single word response. So if someone's written the word 2 instead of the number 2, you're going to have to change it to a number 2. So you're going to have to change everything so that it's numerical. Also, if you've done it via text boxes, if someone didn't come with someone, quite a lot of people don't write 0. They just leave that box blank. So if it is blank, you're going to have to add in zeros. Otherwise, it's not going to upload. And then finally, with the demographic questions, again, if you didn't make it mandatory and someone has answered some of the questions but skipped other questions and they haven't selected prefer not to say, if it's a blank response, you're going to have to go back and add in prefer not to say. And then finally, and this one really tripped me up, in the socioeconomic question, when you're asking it, it says things like, are you a modern, professional, traditional occupations, such as, and then it gives you examples of what that thing is. So it puts it into context for the reader. But anything after the occupations, so such as onwards, you have to delete from the response because, again, it won't accept your upload if that information is still in there. So you're going to use filter a lot in Excel. You're going to have to filter by question and then work through those little things one by one until you think you've got your data to a point where it's ready to upload and it will be accepted as an upload. So then it's uploading your data. So you have to save the formatted template. Again, do not change the name at all. It won't work if you do. And then what you need to do is you need to go into your Illuminate platform, you need to find the corresponding event activity, and then you need to add your responses, that template, to that activity. And it should be quite simple, but it's not. So the first time I tried to upload to Illuminate, it took me nearly 2 hours. And a lot of it was around errors, which I've shared with you now. They're a lot quicker uploads these days because I've fixed all those errors, but you will get errors. And annoyingly, they're presented one at a time. So if you do get an error, you'll get a box that looks like this. And the bit in red, which is too small for you to read, but it says there's a validation fail, and it tells you the line number and then the corresponding question number. So it doesn't tell you what the fail is, it just tells you there is a fail. And so you go into your spreadsheet, you find the error, you fix it. If it's to do with formatting, I would do whatever you can to fix all those errors there and then before you try re-uploading, because if it's 2 lines down, you're going to get the same fail again. And you need to do that until you get rid of all your fails. And then things that I would recommend, Tom, if you could just move on. So we've talked about presenting one at a time. And you should go back and fix things in your template if you can. Also, if errors keep appearing, go and fix it in your survey build if you can, because then next time you pull the results, you won't be getting those same errors. That's a really important thing to do. And then once all the errors are fixed, you should hopefully get this glorious screen which says successful upload and your data is now in Illuminate and all is well. Some challenges that you may face while you're doing this is, we just talked about it, repeated errors. So if you get them, take steps to fix them in your spreadsheet first before you keep re-uploading it, otherwise it will fail every single time. And then afterwards, fix them in your survey if you can, so you don't have to deal with it the next time you do an upload. This is a funny one. So too many responses. The reason I put this in is because I just couldn't get my data into Illuminate, and no matter, I had no errors on it, so there was no reason why it shouldn't be going in, but it just wasn't going in. And I contacted PricewaterhouseCoopers help desk, and they are super helpful and they're super responsive. Like, all this was sorted within a day. But I sent them the data and they couldn't figure out why it wasn't uploading. And then they played around with it at their end. And then the advice I was given was, I had too many responses. So I had 1,000 responses, which, it's a fair amount of responses, but it's not a huge amount of responses. And trying to upload that many at one time was causing the system to just fall down. They weren't sure why. And so what I was advised to do was to take my 1,000 responses and to cut it into multiple uploads. And the advice was to do it in groups of 100. So that's getting your template and creating 10 templates, all the same file name, and then uploading them one at a time. So again, that takes a lot of additional time that ideally you shouldn't be spending. It should just be one upload. Hopefully that will be fixed and ironed out in future. But they are some of the challenges that you may face. And then finally, we've got useful resources. So Illuminate do have FAQs. They're quite comprehensive. They aren't always consistent with the latest advice, but they're a really good starting point, and they're available on the Arts Council website. Steph's going to put all the links in the chat. There's also plenty of training guides within the Illuminate platform itself. So if you're in the platform and you're not sure how to do something, then there are resources in there that will talk you through that process. There is also the PwC help desk. They are super helpful and they're really lovely, and they do, really want to help you work things out. And they're very, very responsive. And then finally, if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, then as Steph says, I quite often will talk about updates to Arts Council collections or things that I've spotted that aren't great. One of the latest ones is how they capture Net Promoter Score. So I found this out because I was building a framework for somebody and I went to look at their optional questions. So Net Promoter Score helps you understand how satisfied your audiences are with you and how much you've engaged. And it's scored from 0 to 10 standard, but on the template it's down as 1 to 10. So I reported that to PwC and to ACE, and I heard back this morning that they are going to change it to 0 to 10. So that's a really positive thing, but you do need to keep on top of it because there are changes to templates, and I don't often see them communicated particularly brilliantly. And so it often relies on someone like me looking at something and go, oh, when did this change? So it is important that you keep on top of it. But those are all useful resources, and everyone at all those organisations are very nice and helpful. And that is it. Has anyone got any questions?
Yes, there's been quite a lot of activity actually. First of all, someone's actually said that they have updated the error now, and you do get a chunk of errors at once.
Oh.
You don't just get one at a time anymore. So clearly that's
Wow.
something that someone has complained about or given feedback about, and they've changed that. So that's really good to hear. Someone's also mentioned that the Illuminate upload doesn't actually work on Firefox. So that's just something to be aware of. You'll might need to use a different browser platform to do that. We've had someone mention that it was new to them about the vulnerable adults exemption. I've just gone and found that in the FAQs and just posted that particularly. I actually, that was news to me. I'm vice chair of the board of an Arts Council MPO and we predominantly work with vulnerable adults. However, I wondered if we're not exempt because we do put on exhibitions that then the public
that'll be it.
So I did wonder whether the person who'd mentioned that exemption but was new to them and they think of themselves in that category, they might
I was going to say it's only if you're solely working with under 16s or solely only working with vulnerable adults. If you do a bit of something else, then you're going to have to report on that activity.
Yeah, but general advice is speak to your relationship manager about interpreting that guidance, because if you do feel like that fits with you and you weren't aware, then have a chat with them. Someone's asked about what about using the impact and insights toolkit to survey people, which does negate some of the cons and also has an Illuminate template which helps to import. Interested in your thoughts, Kate?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. If you're an organisation that's already using it, then continue to use it and then do they've got Illuminate already mapped into it. I think that's absolutely fine. Some organisations, as we discussed at the start, I think CPPs have to do, I think it's 4 events per year using the Impact Insights Toolkit. So it might be that you want to only use that. It might be that you want to use it in conjunction with optional questions in Illuminate, for example, or you might want to collect all that information in one giant collection and then upload that data accordingly.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Someone's mentioned that we use Google Forms to collect data, and I include the descriptions of the occupations in the question. Makes it massive, but then have a short occupation name as a multi-choice response.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah, good way of doing it. Thank you for sharing that. What else have we got? Someone else mentioned each quarter I've sent the file to the Illuminate help desk and asked them to fix it, as it's so easy to make errors, which obviously you have demonstrated as well, Kate. Someone's mentioned that they don't see how they can separate out audience members. Does that make sense to you, or do we need an elaboration?
Can we have an elaboration on that?
Yeah, if you could just elaborate on what you mean by that question, that would be great. Someone's mentioned they want to do an annual survey not linked to a specific event. Is that a problem, or do we have to create a fake event? It will be in a different platform and imported into Illuminate.
No, I see what they mean.
Someone said actually on the back of that, we do it that way. It's just that you'll still have to upload the data back to Illuminate on the event or activity level. So you'll need to filter out your big export file and create multiple upload files at event level. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but if they're saying that it's just general annual research as being opposed to a specific event, then that information might be useful to you, but because it is at event and activity level, I don't know how that would work in Illuminate, because you have to attach it to something. And I'm pretty sure Arts Council would not be delighted with fake events being created. I don't know. It might be one to pick up. I'm not a spokesperson for Arts Council, so it might be one to pick up with them in the PwC help desk and just ask them their opinion on that.
Yeah.
It might be that you do your annual research and ask all the questions that you want to do, and you can include your Illuminate like demographics, for example, so that you're collecting those consistently, and that you're not asking those event specific questions, but you're asking more organizational wide questions, so that you still have like a comparable data set when you are running the mandatory questions through the Illuminate platform, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Great, thank you. The elaboration of the question about separating out audience members has come through. So would it be possible to separate out audience members to target for surveying? It wouldn't make the survey more suitable for a disabled audience.
Still not.
Disabled and non-disabled audience members, and of course adults vulnerable for other reasons.
Yeah.
Maybe we can pick that one up.
Yeah.
At another time, or maybe they can message you separately, Kate, after this.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
I've
just seen a comment, and I think that this is really relevant. So quite a lot of people do need to do paper survey collections because they're big outdoor things or whatever. Or, they don't have the facilities of people walking around with iPads with a collection on it. I did one recently where the organisation needed to capture Illuminate questions. It was all outdoor, but where the event was, it was super duper poor Wi-Fi, so you couldn't actually connect to collect these responses. And because at the moment Illuminate doesn't allow for offline collections, the person who ended up delivering that collection was Audience Agency, which is just bonkers because they're the people that used to deliver that collection. And then it was uploaded to that organisation's Illuminate platform, the answers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. I've actually just got a question, Tom, if you could. So we have an Illuminate template on GoodCRM. Can you just quickly show maybe how that works?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And I can talk people through it. So let's just make this a bit bigger because I'm on such a big screen here. Okay, this is GoodCRM for those of you that haven't seen it before. And we do, as Steph says, have an Illuminate template. It's worth saying this is part of our record forms section. So record forms are useful to record all kinds of different data within the system, and record form responses can connect to all of the other data in your platform, people, organizations, projects, etc. And so what we have is a template, and to install the template in your CRM, you would come over to the App Store in the top right-hand menu. And then there's lots of things we can add on here, but one of them is this Illuminate form template. We could go ahead and do that install, and as you can see, we're now in our records section with that template in place. It is the mandatory questions. Interestingly, we're planning an update to this, and I think one of the key things we'll do is populate the form with those mandatory questions, but also add the question bank of optional questions so that they're easy for you to add in. But just so you know, it is very easy to customize this form. So if I click on add response within my records, we'll see the default form that gets generated. And we can come to our form editor here. And this is where we could do things like add that explanatory text. So we would use this instructions block here, and we might use this to add some long and detailed information about the section of the form or the a particular question, and we can move this around so we can maybe put that at the top of the form if we wish. So that kind of speaks to that idea of needing to add explanatory text. We can also, of course, add in those additional questions. So when we talked about maybe data capture and getting permissions or getting additional information, we can go ahead and add new fields either from our existing question bank, or we can go ahead and add brand new fields as well. So if we want to collect email addresses, consents, that kind of thing, all of that is possible. And then these forms can then be shared. So when we share a form, you can specify a member of your team to be notified if you wish when you get responses in. You might not want to do that for something you're expecting hundreds of responses. But then we get a link that we can share, and then people can fill that in. It does require an internet connection. I'm not going to pretend that we have solved all those offline collection issues, but you can import data into this form from spreadsheets as well to include offline data in any other data you've collected, and then you're able to export all of that data into your spreadsheet to do all of the wonderful data wrangling things that Kate's kind of talked us through. So yeah, hopefully that's a little useful show round.
Thank you. Also, I'm just thinking about the annual survey as well, because obviously that's another big piece of reporting that organizations need to do. Is can people use Good CRM for the annual survey as well as Illuminate?
Yeah, well, we know of at least one organization, client organization, who is using GoodCRM for their annual survey. I'm sure there are more as well. So yeah, if that's something you're interested in, I think there could be a few different ways to go about it, depending on how the information your particular organization needs to report on, but also how you've got your data structured. So we'd definitely recommend you speak to one of our team about that. Penelope will be happy to kind of talk you through your options and give you some direction. But yeah, absolutely possible. We know people are doing it.
Great. Thank you. I think we'll need to wrap there because it's 12:30, which is our scheduled finish time. I just want to say thank you so much for so many of you joining today and giving an hour and a half of your time. It's really good of you. And thank you so much to Kate for sharing all your wisdom and some of your, I don't know, less pleasant experiences maybe with trying to use the Illuminate template and form. I've put lots of links in the chat box if anyone wants them, links for us. If you're interested in getting in touch with us about anything, we really try and be a tech company that is very present and we're not faceless. We try and be really hands-on with our customers and clients. And so hopefully you've kind of got a sense of that today. And I've got also some links in the chat for Kate and all of the help that you can get from Illuminate as well. And I'll just post them back in the chat again because they've kind of got lost in the conversation a little bit. But yes, thank you so much for joining us and keep in touch.